Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing another individual album review, this time on the newest album from Moby, Future Quiet. So this review is going to be a little bit different. But before I get to that, I want to give a little bit of context here for my opinion on Moby. Well, actually before I do that, it's pretty late at night, so forgive me if I'm a little bit out of it in this review and my presentation. But honestly, regarding my opinion on Moby, I kind of don't really have much of one. I mean, yeah, I cannot deny it's kind of insane just how much variety his music has, including punk, pop, and ambient. And that's not a bad thing at all. Now, my main exposure to Moby's music personally was through one song that my dad had downloaded when I was a kid, and thus I listened to it a lot, that being We Are All Made of Stars from his 2002 album 18. And outside of that, I knew he was quite well known, and I knew he did a lot of ambient music, but I could not have told you much of anything else. But over the past month or so, probably longer actually, I decided to listen to every Moby album. Most of them I only listened to once, because that's a lot of music to take in, considering this is his 23rd album, and some of them are multiple hours long, and I managed to sit through those, not all at once I should add. But while his most acclaimed album, Play, didn't really do that much for me personally on the one listen that I gave it, I just feel like that album probably wasn't really for me. I will say the one album that really impressed me the most was 2005's Hotel, which is a goddamn excellent record that captures so many emotions for a moment in time, and it's pure magic with such gorgeous melodies and production. And while other Moby albums seemed to be aiming for a similar vibe, so far I cannot say any of them really came anywhere close to that one. Maybe if I listened to them more they could, but I kinda doubt it. But anyway, this new album is nearly an hour and a half. It's 14 tracks, and a lot of it is instrumental, including the final 3 tracks, 2 of which happen to be the longest tracks here. And even the songs that have lyrics feature mostly pretty simple lyrics. So it does make for kind of a tricky album to review in an individual video. But I spent so much time listening to his insanely huge discography that I figured it may be worth the challenge of giving this album a proper full-length review. And honestly, I think there are some things that could be said about this that I might skip over in a mini review. Although as you'll see, I said it's not going to be a normal review, it's going to be a bit different. And yeah, I will be saying some things that might kind of in some ways have nothing to do with the album itself, but we'll get there. Because after the mostly uninteresting revision of When It's Cold I'd Like to Die from his third album back in the 90s, not a song I'm a big fan of in the first place, and this new version didn't really do that much for me either, and then the second song here, This Was Never Meant for Us, which also just feels pretty boring. From that point on, it almost feels like the album kind of begins there after those 2 songs, and I'm not even sure I can fully explain why, especially considering one of those 2 songs I will have to say more about later, which might kind of fit into the album as a whole in terms of its lyrical content. So when I say this review is going to be a little bit different, well, it's really just that this isn't the kind of album I usually talk about in its own video, and a lot of this album is really about the feelings that it evokes rather than any objective meaning, at least the way I see it, considering that a lot of it is instrumental. I mean, right after those first 2 songs, we get Retreat, which is an uncomfortably melancholic song that feels nostalgic for me in a way that makes it almost difficult to listen to, and I don't mean that in a bad way at all. But also, there's the part of me that realizes as I'm saying all this that maybe none of this is true at all, and maybe I'm just trying to find more to say about it than there actually is. But then, maybe that's exactly what I just did now, because it is often hard to fully pinpoint emotions to put them into words. It definitely reminded me of the past in an odd way that I'm not sure the cause of, nor am I exactly sure how to describe it. I guess some of what I originally said when I started talking about this was true, but maybe not fully. But it is definitely a haunting track. And thus, it feels kind of weird to be reviewing this album in its own video. Like I've been saying, especially because a lot of this album feels quite nostalgic in a weird way, almost like it represents the passing of time. And I think it's worth talking a bit about the lyrics, because while Precious Mind feels like it's about how the world is full of disastrous violence and chaos, but also in a lot of ways life just goes on in other places, well, look at pretty much any other track here with the lyrics, At least if you stretch your imagination, I think it can fit the feeling of the passing of time. And honestly, you know what? As I just talked about Precious Mind, just the idea of life just going on. I mean, that even kind of fits too, and I didn't even realize that as I was writing it. I'm just thinking of this now off script. Now, here's the point in the review where I fully acknowledge that this is quite possibly a stretch, but I'm going to interpret this in my own way, regardless of what was intended, and I will also acknowledge that I talk a lot about the passing of time in my reviews, and I think it's mainly because I'll fully admit it's one thing that really messes with my head and really makes me feel emotional, and it's one of the hardest things for me to accept. I think back to multiple years ago, and it still feels so recent, like the current day could never arrive, and yet it has, and it's only going to be here for a short period of time, because more and more changes eventually, and maybe I'm just always searching for comfort amidst the endless, terrifying reality that nothing is permanent, as much as I sometimes wish it could be. And it's also tricky because I like embracing new chapters in my life and new opportunities, but it's also really hard to say goodbye to the old ones. And yeah, often music is one of the things that makes me think about that the most, so don't blame me for hearing the melancholic sounds of this album that evoke those feelings in me, and therefore trying to figure out if the lyrics could support that overall meaning. So take all of this with a grain of salt, but it is worth mentioning how This Was Never Meant for Us could be read as a look back at everything in one's life thus far, and realizing that you're gonna die one day, and feeling like maybe the universe wasn't designed specifically for your generation, considering just how many generations there are, were, and will be. Yeah, that realization sounds kind of obvious, but it is easy to forget things like that when this modern day is the only reality you know. And while the lyrics of Estrella del Mar, I hope I pronounced that correctly, are in Latin, and I don't know Latin, so I might be misunderstanding the translations that I read, it seems to be talking about a new future and people on some kind of a new path, which would make sense considering how impermanent everything is and that we're all only going to be here for a certain amount of time before we all die. And at least if everything goes according to plan, there will be humans here after us. And then there's the collab with Serpent with Feet on Air, where lines like, "It's been a while since I've seen you smile, but I believe in us somehow," feel like another reference to how eventually time just passes, no matter how long it takes. Now, am I completely overthinking all of this? Probably, yeah. But when this album's mood just perfectly seems to sum up those feelings I was talking about, it is worth mentioning some connections you could draw from the lyrics. And also, if Moby wasn't now 60 years old and 3 decades into his career of releasing albums, maybe I wouldn't feel this way as much, and that might be unfair of me. But then that's where I have to point out, once again, that the album opens with a reworking of a Moby song from 3 decades ago, and yeah, I guess it just feels like some kind of full circle moment in a way. And then to add to all those Easter eggs I was pointing out in the lyrics, if you want to call them that, even the song I was talking about earlier, Retreat, just repeats the word home over and over again, and to me it represents a desire for familiarity. So if we're looking more objectively at what's actually here, it's often a mostly pretty ambient album, and the piano is very prominent on multiple of these tracks, with a very echoey sound a lot of the time that feels like it's trying to demand all your attention. And I often think it works in doing so, where it's like the world just stopping for a moment in time as you reflect on, well, whatever this album makes you reflect on. That's the thing with this kind of ambient album, especially considering this one is mostly instrumental, where I think the feelings it evokes are probably more important than any kind of overall message or objective meaning. I don't know for sure what Moby would think of me saying all this, but I'm guessing he'd probably agree. I could be wrong, I don't know. Meanwhile, I also think this could work as background music. I actually think it does from what I've heard. I listened through this album in full multiple times, including giving it my full attention as well as listening to it while I did my reading for school. And in the latter context, I think it worked quite well, keeping my mind stimulated with some pretty sounds that were quite pleasant and helped me focus on my homework. And it may have even helped me feel smarter in the moment, giving me more context to help understand my textbook. And in the former setting of just listening to this album by itself, I mean, I think it's kind of underwhelming, I'm not gonna lie. It's just very slow and mellow, and in a way where the strong, powerful moments for me emotionally only show up occasionally, and even then, I'm just left feeling like I might not remember a whole lot of this album very clearly, and I'm also recognizing that if I had not planned in advance to make this review its own video, I would not be saying this much about it. But hey, I hope you enjoyed my ramblings on interpretation of art, ambient music, lyrical interpretations, instrumental music, nostalgia and the passing of time, and this new Moby album. I think I've long accepted now that this YouTube channel isn't just about music, but also about me and whatever random shit I feel like talking about. Sometimes I feel like this channel is just a place for me to share some of my random inner thoughts with whoever feels like listening, and I use music reviews as my way of doing it. And I'm also well aware that I could easily end up boring my audience as a result, and I'm honestly okay with that. This channel is not my job. I have other career goals that are completely unrelated to YouTube, and if people find my content boring, that's totally okay, and I totally understand, and it's not going to stop me from making these videos. So anyway, back to the album. My favorites were The Haunting Retreat, which I mentioned earlier. Estrella del Mar was very pretty, and I already mentioned the collab with Serpent with Feet, which had some great vocals. Selene is also a very pretty piano song. And then the closing track, The Opposite of Fear, is arguably the most calming track on the album, and I think it fits really well as a closer, as a more peaceful moment after a lot of the melancholic sounds throughout the previous tracks. And yeah, like I said earlier, it was a nice album to listen to while I did my studying, so I guess I'll give it a strong 6 out of 10. I do think it takes a bit to get going. I mentioned the first 2 tracks were kind of boring, and beyond that, it's not really an album that I think I'd be listening to that much on its own. And I probably won't even be listening to this much in general. I just don't think it's particularly special in the grander scheme of things, and he's definitely got better albums than this one. Now, this might have been a failed experiment as an album review, but this video isn't only an album review. There's a lot more to it than that, and I also recognize that a lot of what I've said isn't all that deep or original, but it's just me telling you some things that were on my mind. So now, with all that being said, thank you for watching. Feel free to let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of my video and or what you thought of this new Moby album. I think this review right here is one more example for me of why my YouTube channel is not just a music review channel. It's also just a channel where I just, talk about stuff that's on my mind. And I think I've noticed that very much with this review. But, I gave my opinions on the album somewhat. And, I think that's about all I have to say for now. I do have more stuff coming up soon in terms of mini reviews and also some other cool stuff, which I'll hopefully be posting on this channel soon. But for now, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all soon.